Shocking statement. Ukraine didn't win this strike with more firepower. They won it by making 4 missiles choose the wrong sky. In the middle of a shift change, a 25-mile-per-hour wind shattered the plan. A Russian crew flipped to 96 L6E backup radar, and the Pancir went manual. What happened next is why drone warfare is different now. Phantom Echo dispersed 34 Ram-2X drones into migrating bird formations. A high-powered IR decoy blinded optics, and an AL-50 payload faked a target so huge the SA-22s swerved. We'll replay those 15 seconds frame by frame. Before we move on, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Why gamble the whole strike on 15 seconds you can't practice twice? Because that sliver of time kept showing up like clockwork, and the only way through Valwiki was to write it. Night Owl, the mission's quiet brain, fused Puma recon feeds with local wind models and weeks of radar behavior logs. It kept flagging a repeat pattern at the factory's night shift relief, an interval where optics and radar didn't quite agree on what they were seeing. Not a software bug, a human handoff. Operators trading seats, cameras changing owners, generators dipping as systems cycled. That's where the door cracked open. The vulnerability wasn't a fence or a blast wall. It was people doing what people do. During that relief, the Pancir S1's optical and radar channels fell out of sync for a heartbeat longer than doctrine allowed. In training, those streams line up and the software assigns priorities cleanly. In real life, a tired hand takes a second longer, a lens wiper sweeps late, a cursor lingers on a harmless blip. Night Owl tracked that lag across multiple nights and built a clock to it. The drones wouldn't rush the site head-on. They would pass as noise. The choreograph started far from any searchlight. 34 Ram-2X drones broke formation and slid into loose, migrating bird lanes. No tidy stack, no straight run-in. The lead elements tucked into uneven wing lines. Trailing elements drifted, then corrected in small, living pulses. A high-powered IR decoy, slung higher than the swarm, flooded optical channels with a bloom of heat, washing out the crisp edges that make propeller hubs and motor mounts pop on screens. The goal wasn't invisibility. It was doubt, for just long enough. Why birds? Because birds don't fly like missiles or quadcopters on a waypoint rail. Staggered spacing scrambles distance gates. Irregular wing lines break the straight-line heuristics baked into automated filters. Partial radar cross-section mimicry, small cross-sections that flicker and never present a stable plate, lowers the confidence score that turns a maybe into a shoot. Algorithms that expect coherent tracks start throwing biological labels when returns jitter, split, and merge at low altitude. The swarm leaned into that ambiguity. On paper, Pancir S1 punishes direct clustered threats. Feed it a tight group and it draws neat engagement boxes and fires without drama. Spread the threat across multiple vectors, then distort thermal and optical cues near the ground, and its strengths turn into friction. The system can still kill, but its timing slips, and the handoff between sensors starts to matter more than the missile's speed. That was the bet. The first pass didn't trigger the trap. The Russian crew didn't commit on the initial look. The IR decoy still held, but the clock was moving. Wind models inside Night Owl started ticking warnings. A cross breeze built at treetop height, nudging the lanes. The corridor that Night Owl had drawn on the map, 300 meters wide at the best point, began to narrow in real time. Every second shaved the margin for error. They had tested thermal blinding before on a forward sector, and it consistently bought 8 to 12 seconds. Here they needed 15. That meant holding the IR wash longer, keeping motors cool longer, and accepting that any wobble in spacing could expose a clean silhouette at the worst moment. Night Owl calculated that it was still possible, but only if the handoff lag at Valwiki stayed true to pattern. Months of work made that prediction more than a hunch. Analysts fed Night Owl over 2,000 hours of satellite and ISR logs. Guard rotations formed a rhythm. Generator load dips marked exact handover points. Camera sectors switched with a repeatable stagger that produced the same 15-second blind spot night after night. The junior night crew had a habit of dismissing low, small returns as migrating birds, which reinforced the lull. That was the window Phantom Echo aimed to cross. They had the gap. Then the wind arrived, and the veteran Russian commander changed the rules. What happens when adaptive automation meets a commander who stops trusting the computer? The gap everyone counted on narrows. The trick that fooled the screen gets second-guessed, and the whole plan has to survive under a human thumb on the trigger. That's where Phantom Echo landed when the Crosswind hit. A 25-mile-per-hour wind shear rolled through the target corridor and shoved the Ram 2X swarm off their plotted lanes. The shift wasn't dramatic on a map, but it was enough to deform how each drone looked to sensors. Radars started seeing stretched returns. Thermal profiles smeared as motors fought the gusts and prop arcs lost their symmetry. Night Owl called out the drift, but the models had been built for steadier air. Those small shape changes fed doubt on the other side, which was exactly the condition where a cautious crew starts peeling back automation. The Russian team pivoted fast. The 96 L6E surveillance radar took over the big picture, flagging low, slow tracks that no longer matched the tidy biological labels on the console. The Pancir S1 slid into manual fire control. A veteran operator began curating targets by hand, leaning on experience instead of confidence scores. The calm flow of automatic prioritization gave way to hand-picked threats and rapid reassessments. He re-ranked the returns and began stripping out anything that walked like a flock and not a weapon. Manual mode clipped the edges off the Phantom Echo trick. The human in the loop didn't need a perfect track. He needed a reason to shoot. The drifting wing lines looked less like birds when the wind forced irregular spacing, and he pushed aside the low-confidence returns the software might have tolerated. Targets that held a clean course or pulsed stronger heat nudges rose up the stack. The decoy bloom still washed the optics, but the mouse on the desk moved to where the radar felt sharper. 4 SA-22 missiles left the rails in quick sequence. Telemetry on the Ukrainian side showed intercept solutions tightening as the missiles found geometry even while the drones struggled to hold their staggered lanes. The wind kept opening and closing gaps inside the formation, giving the guidance logic cleaner shots than Night Owl wanted to see. Speed and seeker agility started to compress the timeline. The window for the crossing shrank to seconds. Crosswinds don't just push an aircraft sideways, they bend the signature. Radar cross-section drifts as angles tilt under gusts, and hot spots on engines slide across the frame on infrared. An automated filter will often smooth those jitters to preserve track continuity. A skilled operator can do the opposite, highlight them, and call them out as tells. That compresses the engagement window because the decision to fire no longer waits for a perfect match, only for a pattern that feels hostile under pressure. Ukrainian operators answered with the AL-50 decoy payload. They fired the package and let it bloom into an oversized radar and thermal object, a return far larger than any single Ram 2X. It was an electronic lie scaled for a human staring at a crowded scope. The plume ran hot and wide. The radar cross-section exaggerated into a clean, confident block of energy. Under manual pressure, the missiles biased toward the biggest return. The synthetic heat and amplified radar echo formed a phantom capital target at the edge of the corridor. The operator committed his shots to the thing that looked most dangerous while optics stayed IR blind. That was the opening baked into the plan. Exploit signature prioritization when the system is retasked by hand and sensors are mid-handover. The 4 SA-22s chased the decoy, swerving, then blooming in near-miss detonations that cleared air where no drone actually flew. Those bursts carved gaps in the sky. The corridor reopened, lean and jagged but open, and the strike groups pressed through toward the factory's throat while the crew scrambled for a second salvo. Under wind and pressure, the win came from forcing 4 SA-22s to chase a fake giant instead of 34 real drones. Night Owl bent automation. A veteran on manual still found angles. The AL-50 decoy tipped the balance by soaking missiles into emptiness. burning resources and time while the strike slipped through.